All right, this is part one of what I envision as two parts to discuss dot structures and geometries of molecules. To help, we need to A, remember how to do dot structures, and B, we need to be able to count a couple things if we're going to work out molecular geometries. First of which, we need to know how many regions of electrons there are around a central atom, and B, we need to be able to count the number of atoms bonded to that central atom. So we're going to take a fairly straightforward molecule. We'll do CH4. That's methane. And I'm going to walk you through the process of drawing the dot structure, and then we'll talk about counting regions of electrons and atoms bonded. So with CH4, we're going to add up the valence electrons that each one has first to see how many total we're working with. So carbon has 4 valence electrons, and each hydrogen has 1 valence electron. Now we have 1 carbon and we have 4 hydrogens to give us a total of 4 electrons and 4 here. So we add these together to get 8 valence electrons total that we're working with. If you have carbon present, it's always going to be a central atom. So we're going to go ahead and put carbon in the middle. We're going to then attach each of our other atoms to the central atom using a single bond. As you recall when we learned about covalent bonds, that a covalent bond consists of 2 shared valence electrons. Therefore, right here, this represents 2 electrons, 2 electrons, 2 electrons, 2 electrons. If I do that math correctly, that means I've used 8 valence electrons. So that means I have 0 left to work with. So I don't need to worry about distributing any extra electrons. We'll get to that later. And I need to make sure that my octet is satisfied for second row elements, or my duet for first row elements. And in this case, carbon has 2, 4, 6, has, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8. And so its octet is satisfied, and each hydrogen is touching 2 electrons, and so they're satisfied as well. Okay, in this instance, a bond counts as a region of electrons. And when we're working out geometry, we need to figure this out. So it's electronic regions. It has 4. And again, we're doing this relative to a central atom. And in this case, that is carbon. So it's got 4 regions of electrons. And then how many atoms are bonded to it? It's got, let's see, let's use yellow. 1, 2, 3, 4 bonded to it. So it's got 4 atoms bonded. What we need to know about electronic regions is that they spread out as far away from each other as possible. And what this results in is something called a tetrahedral arrangement of the electronic regions. If we look at this a little more detailed, it's like we have, if we're going to draw this 3-dimensionally, we've got 2 that are kind of in the plane of the paper, and they've got this angle between them, and we've got 1 that kind of comes out closer to us, and 1 that goes further away from us into the plane of the board, the screen, the paper, however you want to think about that, goes away from us. One way that you can visualize this is to think of holding 4 balloons by the knots. And so you hold 4 balloons together by the knots, and the balloons are naturally going to spread as far apart from each other as possible, and they make this loose kind of pyramid shape. Now my angles aren't perfect here. This angle right here is about 109.5 degrees, and all the angles between all of those bonds is 109.5 degrees. Now, when you have 4 electron regions, that's usually going to be the case. It deviates a little bit, but we're not going to get into that now. So we have an H here, an H here, an H here, and one here. And so when we have 4 regions of electrons, 4 electronic regions, and 4 atoms bonded, what we end up with is a tetrahedral geometry. So the shape of this molecule is tetrahedral. All right, I'm going to do one other example down here. So we're going to scroll a little bit. So I want to look at another example. This time I want to look at water. So I'm going to start where, with this right here, as I'm working down here. With water, each hydrogen has 1 valence electron. Each oxygen has 6 valence electrons. Now I've got 2 hydrogens and I've got 1 oxygen. So I've got 2 and I've got 6 for a total of 8 valence electrons to work with. Hydrogen, never going to be a central atom. Oxygen in this case would be our central atom, and so I'm going to go ahead and put oxygen as that central atom. I'm going to attach each hydrogen with a single bond. Now, let's see what color I used up here. I used green. So that means I've used 2 electrons and 2 electrons. If my math is right, that's 4. So I still have 4 valence electrons that need to be distributed. So I need to look to see if my octet rule or duet rule has been met. In this case, my hydrogens are happy. They each have 2 electrons. That's all they want. They have a full outer shell. They're good. But my oxygen only has 4 electrons. It really needs 8. So we're going to take these 4 electrons and start distributing them in pairs. So I've got, there we go. And there we go. That's my 4 electrons. And now I'm out, so that's good. I don't have any more electrons to distribute. Let's see, where are we going after this? We need to count electron regions. So when we're looking at this, my electronic regions or electron regions, okay, I need to count some different things to see. How did I use blue? I used blue. So we already know that that's 1 region and that's 1 region. Okay. A non-bonding pair of electrons also counts as the regions of electrons, and these non-bonding pairs are going to push the other electrons around the atom, so they exert a force, and these electronic regions are still going to spread out as much as possible. So we have another region here and another region here. So that gives us a total of 4 regions of electrons. Now, in terms of atoms bonded, we only have here, this one and this one bonded to it. And so did I use a different color? I used a different color. Sorry about that. We have 2 atoms bonded. So because we have 4 regions of electrons that are pushing on each other, repelling each other as much as possible. By the way, as a throwback, that's what Vesper means. I know it's not spelled Vesper, it's pronounced Vesper though. Valence shell electron pair repulsion. It's these electron regions push against each other. And we only have 2 atoms bonded. So while the electronic geometry around this oxygen, is going to look like we did with the methane, it's just that at 2 of these places, we've got a pair of electrons, we've got a pair of electrons, and then we have our H here and our H here. When we look at this shape, the overall geometry of the molecule only considers the atoms that are bonded. And so we end up with this, bent shape to this molecule because we have these regions of electrons that are pushing away on these other regions of electrons here, and we get a bent shape to our molecule. So the geometry here is bent. So important takeaway here is that the number of electron regions is really what determines the geometry of the overall molecule. So we need to, this is key, is we need to be able to figure out how many regions of electrons there are, and so we know how they're going to be spaced out around the central molecule. After that, we figure out how many atoms are bonded and work out the geometry of the molecule itself.